The drought that gripped the Okavango Delta in southern Botswana was unlike anything the region had witnessed in living memory. Rivers that had flowed for centuries reduced to cracked mudflats, and the lush wetlands withered into expanses of sun-bleached grass and dying trees. For the wildlife that called this paradise home, it was a time of desperate migration, territorial wars, and heartbreaking loss. Tao moved through this transformed landscape like a ghost of her former self. At 8 years old, she had once been the matriarch of a pride of 12 lions, ruling over some of the richest hunting grounds in the Delta. Her name, meaning lion in Setswana, had been earned through years of successful leadership, raising multiple generations of cubs and maintaining the delicate balance of power that allowed her family to thrive. But the drought had shattered everything she had built. As water sources disappeared and prey animals fled, territorial boundaries collapsed. Desperate prides began clashing in violent confrontations over remaining resources. Tao's pride had been attacked by a coalition of younger, stronger lions, driven from their own territory. In the vicious battle that followed, she lost her mate, her grown daughters, and all of her grandcubs in a single devastating afternoon. Now she wandered alone through the wasteland that had once been her kingdom, her golden coat dulled with dust, her proud bearing weighed down by grief so profound it seemed to emanate from her very bones. The familiar landmarks of her territory, the watering holes where her cubs had learned to drink, the shady groves where her pride had rested, all were empty now, transformed into monuments to a life that no longer existed. Dr. Beverly Joubert, the renowned wildlife filmmaker who had been documenting lion behavior in the Okavango for over 20 years, tracked Tao's movements through GPS collar data. The readings painted a heartbreaking picture of an animal in deep psychological distress, wandering in seemingly random patterns across vast distances, calling out with roars that grew weaker and more desperate with each passing day. Lions are intensely social animals, and the complete isolation that Tao now faced was perhaps the cruelest punishment that nature could inflict on her species. On one merciless morning, as the sun climbed toward its zenith and the temperature soared past 40 degrees Celsius, Tao found herself in an area she had never explored before, driven by the desperate search for water. The landscape here was dominated by massive baobab trees, whose ancient trunks rose like monuments from the parched earth. It was beneath one of these giants that Tao first heard the sound that would change her life forever. At first she thought it might be the wind, but as she approached, the sound resolved into something unmistakable, the weak, plaintive cry of a baby in distress. Following it to its source, Tao discovered a sight that should have triggered every predatory instinct she possessed. Huddled in the meager shade provided by the baobab tree's massive roots was a baby elephant, no more than a few weeks old, his wrinkled gray skin already showing the dangerous effects of dehydration and exposure. He was impossibly small for an elephant, probably weighing no more than 60 kilograms. But even at that size, he was larger than any prey Tao would normally attempt to take alone. The baby elephant's trunk moved weakly as he called for his mother, a sound so filled with desperate longing that it bypassed Tao's conscious mind and struck directly at something deeper, something that had been dormant since she lost her own cubs months earlier. His eyes, dark and intelligent even in his weakened state, focused on Tao with the kind of innocent trust that young animals show toward any large creature that might offer protection. Every rule of the African savanna dictated what should happen next. Lions and elephants were ancient enemies. Adult elephants posed one of the greatest threats to lion survival, capable of killing even the largest males with a single blow. Elephant herds were notoriously protective of their young, and any lion foolish enough to approach a baby elephant would face the murderous wrath of the entire family group. But this baby was alone, abandoned or lost, with no protective herd in sight. For a hungry lioness, he should have represented a meal that could sustain her for days.
Yet as Tao looked down at the helpless creature, she felt no stirring of predatory excitement. Instead, she felt something she had not experienced since losing her pride. A powerful surge of protective instinct that seemed to well up from the deepest part of her being. Slowly, moving with a gentleness that would have astonished any observer familiar with lion behavior, Tao approached the baby elephant. Her massive paws, each armed with claws capable of ripping through hide and muscle, stepped carefully around his fragile form as she lowered her great head to sniff his unfamiliar scent. The baby elephant did not flee or show fear. Instead, he lifted his small trunk toward her face in the tentative gesture that elephants use to greet both family members and potential friends. The contact between Tao's warm breath and the baby elephant's sensitive trunk created a moment of connection that transcended every barrier evolution had placed between their species. In that instant, predator and prey formed a bond that would challenge everything scientists thought they knew about animal behavior, maternal instinct, and the capacity for love to overcome even the most fundamental biological programming. Tao knew instinctively that the baby elephant was dying. His skin hung loose on his small frame, indicating severe dehydration, and his movements were growing weaker with each passing hour. Without intervention, he would not survive another day in the brutal heat. She began to groom the baby elephant, her rough tongue working gently to clean the dust and debris from his wrinkled skin. The sensation seemed to comfort him, and his plaintive cries gradually subsided as he pressed closer to her warm body. For the first time since losing her pride, Tao felt the familiar stirring of maternal hormones, now focused entirely on this impossible child. The immediate challenge was water. Tao knew of a seasonal pool about 3 kilometers away, one of the few sources that had not yet completely dried up. But the baby elephant was far too weak to make such a journey on foot. Using a combination of gentle encouragement and physical guidance, Tao coaxed the baby elephant to his feet. When he stumbled and fell, she used her powerful body to support his weight, allowing him to lean against her as they moved slowly through the scorching landscape. The journey that should have taken less than an hour stretched into a grueling 4-hour ordeal, with frequent rest stops in whatever shade they could find. When they finally reached the muddy pool that represented salvation, Tao watched with maternal pride as the baby elephant, whom she had begun to think of as timber, meaning hope in the local language, waded into the precious water and began to drink deeply. She had saved his life, but in doing so, she had committed herself to a path that would challenge every assumption about what was possible in the natural world. Dr. Rebecca Mambo, a Botswanan wildlife biologist studying elephant behavior in the Delta, was conducting a survey of surviving water sources when she witnessed something that made her question her own sanity. Through her binoculars, she observed what appeared to be a lioness standing guard while a baby elephant drank from an isolated pool. The scene was so contrary to everything she understood about African wildlife that she initially assumed she must be observing some kind of unusual hunting behavior. But as she watched for over an hour, it became clear that the lioness was not hunting. Instead, she was protecting the baby elephant, positioning herself between the vulnerable calf and any potential threats, scanning the surrounding area with the vigilant intensity of a mother watching over her young. What Rebecca was witnessing through her binoculars challenged everything she had learned in her years of scientific training. a lioness had not only refrained from killing a defenseless baby elephant, but was actively caring for him as if he were her own cub. 7 years had passed since that fateful day when Tao found a dying baby elephant beneath the baobab tree, and both their lives had been transformed in ways that continued to amaze the scientific community. Timber had grown into a magnificent bull elephant, standing over 2.5 meters at the shoulder and weighing nearly 3,000 kilograms. His tusks gleamed ivory white in the African sun, and his intelligent eyes held the wisdom and confidence of an animal who had never known fear or abandonment. Tao, now 15 years old, showed the natural signs of aging that came with a life lived in the harsh African wilderness. Her golden coat had developed silver highlights around her muzzle, and her movements carried the measured dignity of a lioness who had achieved something unprecedented in the natural world.
Their relationship had evolved from the intense dependency of Timber's early years into something more complex and beautiful, a partnership between two mature animals who had chosen to remain together despite every pressure from nature and human intervention to separate them. But as Timber entered full maturity, both animals faced the greatest challenge of their relationship. Bull elephants naturally leave their maternal herds between the ages of 12 and 15 to begin solitary lives or join bachelor groups. The hormonal changes that drove this separation were beginning to manifest in Timber's behavior, creating tensions that even 7 years of love and adaptation could not entirely overcome. The decision that would define the final chapter of their relationship came during a chance encounter with a large elephant herd led by an ancient matriarch named Nali. Among the elephants was a young female named Kessie, roughly Timber's age, whose graceful movements and intelligent demeanor immediately captured his attention. For 3 days, Timber lingered at the edges of the herd's range, clearly fascinated by the social dynamics he was observing. Tao watched as her adopted son struggled with instincts and desires that she could sense but not satisfy. When Kessie began showing reciprocal interest in Timber, approaching as close as she dared to the boundary where Tao's scent marked their territory, the lioness knew that a moment of decision had arrived. On the 4th morning, Tao made the choice that would prove the depth of her love for the elephant she had raised. Instead of maintaining her usual protective position near Timber, she withdrew to a distant hilltop and allowed him to approach the elephant herd without her intimidating presence. From her vantage point, she watched as Timber took his first tentative steps toward the life he had been born to live. But Timber did not forget the lioness who had given him life and love. Throughout his first day with the herd, he frequently looked toward the hilltop where Tao maintained her distant vigil. As evening approached, Timber made a choice that would be remembered as one of the most touching moments in the annals of wildlife research. He left the herd and climbed the hill to where Tao waited. What followed was a reunion that transcended species boundaries and spoke to the universal language of family love. Timber knelt on his front legs, bringing his massive head down to Tao's level, and gently wrapped his trunk around her neck in an embrace that lasted for several minutes. Tao responded by grooming his face and ears with the same tender attention she had shown him as a baby, marking him with her scent one final time. The farewell was not dramatic or prolonged. Both animals seemed to understand that this was not an ending, but a transformation. Timber touched his trunk to Tao's forehead in a gesture of gratitude and blessing, then turned and walked back down the hill to join the herd that would become his new family.
2 years after their separation, the reunion that the wildlife community had been hoping for finally took place. Timber, now fully grown and accompanied by Kessie and their first calf, returned to the territory where he had grown up.
The meeting between Tao and her adopted son, now a father himself, was captured by Dr. Joubert's cameras and would become one of the most viewed wildlife videos in internet history. The recognition was immediate and profound. Despite 2 years of separation and the dramatic changes in both their lives, Timber approached Tao with the same gentle reverence he had shown as a calf. He introduced Kisi and their baby to the lioness who had raised him, and for one magical hour, 3 generations of an impossible family shared the shade of the baobab tree where it had all begun. Tao groomed the baby elephant with the same tender care she had once shown Timber, while Kisi watched with the respectful attention of a daughter-in-law meeting a beloved mother-in-law. Timber stood guard over them all, his massive presence ensuring that this precious reunion could unfold without interruption or threat. In the years since that reunion, Timber has returned annually to visit Tao, each time bringing new additions to his growing family and maintaining the bond that has become legendary throughout the conservation world. Their story has inspired countless efforts to protect the habitats that allow such remarkable relationships to flourish, and has changed how humans understand the emotional lives of wild animals. As the African sun sets over the Okavango Delta each evening, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson that match Tao's aging coat, their story continues to unfold. Timber's descendants carry forward the wisdom and tolerance that their grandfather learned from a lioness who chose love over instinct, while Tao's legacy lives on in the conservation programs that her story inspired. In the end, what began as an impossible rescue became something far greater, a testament to the power of maternal love to transform not just individual lives, but our understanding of what family means in the natural world. Tao saved more than a dying baby elephant that day beneath the baobab tree. She saved our faith in the possibility that love truly can conquer all, even in the harsh and beautiful world of the African wilderness. Their story reminds us that, in a world often divided by differences and conflicts, the deepest truths about connection and care can be found in the most unexpected places. In the heart of a lioness who chose to mother an elephant, and in the gratitude of an elephant who never forgot the love that saved his life and shaped his soul.